This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchin Ford. Bird Culchin Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
And welcome in, everyone, to the Bearcast on SicEm365.com and the Baylor Athletics on SicEm365 YouTube page, where we are live each Tuesday at 11:15. So here we are once again, and within a couple of weeks now, the start of the regular season. I'm Craig Smoke, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer. Also have Garrett Ross behind the scenes as well. And this is where you can find us each week live on the YouTube page. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't already done so previously. We would much appreciate that. And, of course, you can also catch us after the fact on all your favorite podcast platforms or on the same YouTube page just after the fact. But any way that you digest what we do on this podcast or across the SicEm365 and 365 Sports platform, we do thank you for your time. And, man, time drags on during the offseason, and all of a sudden it's all just boom, 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 boom. Everything's quick and going on, and here we are, Grayson, and it's all underway, basically. Got a couple of weeks till the start of the regular season, obviously, and Tarleton State rolling into town, but fall camp has opened up. We're going to get into some notes on that. I don't know how you feeling, man, as this all starts to kind of get underway here.
I mean, it's definitely cool that we get to talk about football. The first scrimmage was this weekend, so that's obviously something of note. Outside of that, it's just kind of getting ready for what's coming up in that first matchup with Tarleton State. And I think right now, I think Baylor is trying to get to a place where they can not just make a bowl game, but be competitive all year long. And so that's kind of where things are at on that end. Recruiting has kind of somewhat slowed down. I know we're going to talk about a big addition, but for the most part, it seems like the focus is really squarely on football right now.
Yeah, Baylor with a big quarterback pledge. We will get into that, but not to start off with. To start off with, we are going to begin with the actual team itself, and we'll get into some of the other notes like the addition of Quinn Murphy here in just a little bit. But camp opened up officially, and one of the big storylines, Grayson, is continuing to be the quarterback competition that rolls on, and that's fine when it's spring ball and there's no rush, and it's fine when fall camp opens up and it's only been a few days, but we're 2 weeks out from a game now at this point, and there's still not even a clue that it's even leaning in a certain direction. Now, maybe, if you're out at practice, you feel differently about that, but for those of us who are, I haven't been to practice at all, and even when we're there, we don't get the full meal deal of getting to watch from start to finish. So, kind of flying blind here. I know we've talked about it multiple times, throughout the last few months, but now that we're 2 weeks away from an actual football game, and Dave Aranda has once again discussed this as he did this past Saturday, speaking to the media for the first time since media days. How do you feel about just what you've heard, what you've seen, and I don't know, what you're thinking now about the quarterback spot?
It feels to me like they want to make a decision and that a decision is coming soon. I don't think this is one where they're going to wait till the Tarleton State game or one where they're going to, push it into the season at all. I know no one really reached out and took the job this past weekend, and so that causes some concern, I feel like, for some people. But in general, I just think they want this battle to be over. I do think that DeQuan Finn is still the leader to win this battle, whether that comes this week or after the scrimmage this weekend, which is always the most important one, that second scrimmage. I think a decision is going to be coming soon, and I expect that decision to be DeQuan Finn. That's not to say that Sora Robertson hasn't done a great job, and it's not to say that he hasn't really been better than DeQuan Finn in some aspects, but I think what this team needs for this year, I think it's going to lean towards DeQuan Finn.
Yeah, I still feel that way as well, but just interesting to get down this close now to where, you need to make a decision here in the next few days. Not, hey, it's only April, don't worry about it. It's no, the game's in 2 weeks, so we kind of need to know, just in general, everybody, the team included in that, what's going on at the quarterback spot. So just wanted to start off with that since it was talked about once again and since there still remains no decision. But as you mentioned, that should be coming really at any point, and if they were to pop this weekend, I don't think that would necessarily be all that surprising.
Right, and my kind of overarching question is, does Dave Aranda officially announce that? Is it going to be something where, when he talks this weekend, he actually says who it is, or just more of an internal thing? That's something that, we don't really know how he's going to handle that. I would assume, based on the way he's talked about it, though, that he would say something. It seems like he's very open to that once they actually name the guy. It seems that way.
Yeah, I think he understands that everybody wants to know and that it's a big announcement. It's the one he's getting asked about the most, so I would think he would understand that that's something you put out there publicly and just, let people react how they'll react, but at least just move forward and make it known and say this is our guy and go from there. And so hopefully we get that this Saturday, but if not, then that would be another interesting layer if it went another week. But, man, you don't have, but like I've said a couple times now, a couple of weeks before you actually have to play a game and roll out a starter. So that continues on, but for how long, we'll see. And also another note, just on the surface, was the fact that Gary Patterson was spotted out at practice. And I know that he passed along a comment, or I saw a comment from, I think it was like Parker Rem, maybe, of local TV, I guess, talked to somebody out at practice, and that Gary's a friend of the program, and he was just out there taking notes and hanging out. So, whatever that is, like, he was brought in as an analyst this offseason. He was around for spring ball. He's done a ton of work. He's watched a ton of film, done all those things, passed along his, advice and his notes and all those types of things. And then Aranda was just really dodgy when I asked him about it at media days, and looking back on it, like, now I understand why he didn't just answer my question and why it was difficult to say, like, just what Gary Patterson would be doing during the season. And eventually he did land on that he wasn't going to be at games and all that. And then we hear last week that he's not involved at all. And then here he is at practice. So I guess he's just going to hang out and contribute where he wants to, I suppose, whatever arrangement they have worked out. But he is not a part of the official staff. And yet a friend of the program is the title that is the best to probably go with moving forward. That's the one that was used yesterday.
It's definitely a weird thing, right? Because when you make this move, it kind of feels like, okay, he's no longer going to be anywhere near practice after that, is what it felt like. But obviously that was not the case. I do feel like Aranda has been pretty open about the fact that they still talk and they're still in communication. And so I do think that that's probably a big part of this. And so now I think, moving from that, it's more just about, what's he going to bring to the table when he comes to practice? Or is it more of a thing where, hey, we just want him to show up whenever he wants to, and then he can provide his insight and notes and what he took away from the day? I think it's valuable. I mean, Gary Patterson is a great coach. He's a guy that's seen a lot on the offensive side and the defensive side. And so I do think he's a guy who could help in whatever capacity that is. And obviously, I think we're at a point now where we don't really know what that capacity is.
Yeah, it's just that he's not officially a member of the program, and he's not going to be around on game days. But beyond that, I guess if he just wants to sprinkle his wisdom here and there. But just funny to see him days removed from, no, wait, he's not even involved, and yet here he is still. So, whatever they've got cooked up, just interesting to see that, and interesting to see that reporting a week ago just about where that all sort of stood. So we'll see. I guess just kind of like the quarterback competition as we draw closer to the season. But those were a couple of just general notes, I think, coming out of last week. But you got to go to, I guess, a couple of practices a week ago. I was on vacation, and I'll head out there today just to see them, warm up basically, and I don't know, do special teams or whatever it is they've got cooked up for a Tuesday. But in terms of what you saw last week and I guess what you've heard and just what you've gathered from the past few days in the start of fall camp, what would you like to hit on?
I think we got to start with the offensive line, and it's been a big problem for Baylor going into last year. We saw it. They were really, really struggling. They brought in a bunch of transfers, trying to revamp the group and bring in different size guys, different guys at various positions, guys who fit a new scheme as they're moving, of course, from wide zone to a more spread air raid type scheme. And so how does that work, right? How does that mesh? Well, so far, I think there are still struggles. And I think I heard about it this weekend that once again, the offense struggled, the defense won the day. And so then my question becomes, okay, the defense wins the day and is dominant, and the defensive line is really, really good. Does that mean that the defense is good, or does it mean that the offensive line had another really bad day? I tend to lean somewhere probably in the middle, where the offense line is still struggling and the Baylor defense has gotten better from a year ago. One thing I will caution is that the first scrimmage every year to start fall camp typically goes the defense's way. So I'm curious going into the second one if the offense can make up some ground. They really need to. So I'm just kind of sitting there waiting patiently to kind of figure out, okay, do they find their starting five? Do they have a five that can really go out there and get the job done for this offense to be successful and at least put up a fight, be average? And if they can do that, I think this offense can be successful. If not, then they're going to have some problems again.
Yeah, and that shouldn't come as a surprise. I mean, anything that's been projected, whether for better or worse, has all revolved around how good the offensive line is going to be or how bad it's going to be. Like, if you think that they're going to win, I don't know, I think probably the ceiling is like 7 or 8 wins, like maximum they could pull out in terms of the average across the board opinion. That is higher than most. You just give the benefit of the doubt, like, I assume the offensive line is going to be better, and if it's not, then they're not going to be very good. And if you just don't put any faith in it at all, you're probably somebody who's projecting them to win 5 games or 4 games or whatever. So I think predictions have been based largely on the offensive line because you feel pretty good about everything else. And so to hear that the offensive line's maybe not that great, not a surprise. This should not be a surprise to anybody because that's been the talking point literally the entire offseason is like, you feel how you want to feel about any transfer they brought in or any coaching change they made, but it's like unanimous across the board that nobody's confident in the offensive line and that it's going to be really good. So, like, how good it is truly, I feel like, the barometer of the season on where this whole team's going to fall. And so to hear that coming out of the scrimmage is a little bit concerning. Shouldn't be surprising, though. But, yeah, it's just a matter of, is that the case or is that just that day they weren't very good and in the next couple of weeks they're going to get better? I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be that great, but I hope that some of that can be maneuvered around, and some of that is that the defense is actually better as well. I would assume so. I would hope so at this point with all the changes they've made. But, yeah, the O-line remains the large looming question. Yeah,
and the good news is that they do have, it feels like they got 10 guys competing for 5 spots. So at least there's competition. The question is it good competition or just, nobody's, jumping up and taking roles and securing jobs? I will say it's also important to note that Colin Truitt, Sidney Fugar, Colton Thomason, and Kamari Landers are all guys that, Kamari Landers still pending, but the other 3 are enrolled this summer. So they're still guys that are kind of getting used to the scheme, getting adjusted, things like that. So again, as the weeks progress in fall camp, you might see them take bigger steps forward since they weren't here in the spring. I think that is something worth noting, and those are guys that are expected to have a role on this offensive line.
What is the status of Kamari Landers?
Yeah, so he hasn't been spotted at practice. So until he is, I'm not going to pencil him in or pin him in for this group. One thing I will say with him, though, is I still fully expect him to redshirt, but there is always the chance he comes in and is really, really good. That would honestly be awesome if that is the case. But we'll see on that. Again, he hasn't been spotted at practice, so we'll see. I have not heard any reason for me to believe that he won't be at Baylor at some point during the fall, though.
All right, so offensive line remains a concern. Again, not a surprise there. And reports coming out of the weekend that they didn't look great, and some of that could also be the defense, but time will tell. Hey, in a couple of weeks we'll find out for sure, and certainly over the weeks that follow that. What else stood out to you from your experience out at practice and just things that you've heard over the last few days?
I mean, I think it's important to mention that the defense line was really good. I mean, and that's an area where I think everyone has some confidence in then taking a big step forward. You add Linus Noel from Texas Southern, and he's a guy who's been mentioned repeatedly at the start of fall camp. He's going to plug and play at nose tackle. I think he's going to be a huge upgrade from what they were working with last year. So you have him and Cooper Lands being able to anchor that nose tackle position along with, some depth guys like you could put Brendan Bett there at times as well. But those 2 guys I think are going to be featured in that role. And then you got guys like Trevin Maya, who is apparently playing really well and taking a step forward. That would be huge after he transferred from Oregon last year and, in my eyes, underwhelmed. Jackie Marshall looking healthy. He's probably, in my eyes, the best candidate to be their most impactful defensive lineman. He continues to show some good things. Then you got Brendan Bett, Kyan Roberts-Day, Trey Wilson as guys who are also doing a nice job in contributing. That's a deep group. That's a really solid group, a lot of size, a lot of length, and I think they're more suited for this season than last year's group was. I think there's more talent, more upside, and also a safer floor because of the sheer size and strength they finally have up front.
So that's something that bodes well. Is part of the offensive line struggles could be the defensive lines improved, and that's what you would expect just with all the changeover. You weren't banking on changing D-line coaches. That was something that just occurred, but with Aranda on that side, Patterson's influence on that side, even in his unofficial capacity, and just the transfers you went and grabbed, that's good to hear that seems to be progressing. And look, they're going to have to be better than just slightly better on offense and a little bit better on defense. Like, they're going to have to be pretty good on defense, I think, especially if the offensive line's potentially going to struggle the way that you think it's going to struggle. Like, DeQuan Finn running around or whatever is going to make some difference and be able to offset that to some degree, but not entirely. So, yeah, the defense needs to be better. I mean, based on last year alone, like, it has to be better, basically. It'd be a shock if it wasn't, and Dave Aranda will be fired if it's not. But I do think they're going to have to win some games, like, for this team. And so that's encouraging to hear that the line is progressing. There's some interesting parts on that part of the defense. What else stood out to you?
I felt like Aranda's comments about injuries, I felt like that was kind of interesting. They're dealing with some, it seems, on the defensive line. Obviously, Matt Jones has been wearing a yellow shirt for some time now, and he's been limited. Some other guys have been limited as well. And it seems like Aranda's being very cautious with that, with the mindset of kind of looking back to what has happened the past few years, where they've dealt with substantial injuries in fall camp and in the spring. Obviously, they had one this year with Kurt Daneker in the spring, but you're kind of hoping to avoid some of those. So that also makes me kind of curious about, how many reps are they going to give guys these two scrimmages? How much are they going to push them to go out there and play, full contact? I think they need to, and I feel like they absolutely have to, honestly, but they also have to be smart about it. And it feels like Aranda is trying to be cautious when it comes to the starters, how many reps he's giving them in these kind of scrimmage settings. I think this weekend is probably going to be the one that they kind of set everyone loose as much as they can to figure out position battles, figure out, who's excelling, and then go from there. Because the last scrimmage, I don't think you're going to see much of the starters at all.
Yeah, probably not. You're trying to preserve them at that point. I mean, you've got this week, and then it's game preparation time. So if there's guys banged up, no point in trying to, risk that any further when you just need a few days to get into a game week. So, that's crazy how quickly that pops up. You just started camp and you already have guys. But, hey, when you got guys slamming into each other, like, that's going to happen. But still, not sure how to read into ominous sounding or very vague injury talk. It could be nothing. It could be something. We'll find out. That's the good news. Everything we're going to find out, all these questions we have, we'll know in 2 weeks. We'll see.
Right. And I don't view them as hugely substantial injuries. It's more so just about how are they going to operate practices and scrimmages with the mindset of we don't want players to get hurt, which it felt like Aranda was kind of alluding to that because they don't want to sustain more of the injury luck that they've had in the past few seasons, honestly.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Try and stay as healthy as you possibly can, and if guys have a little thing here and there, don't exacerbate it. Try to just manage through it for a couple more weeks. Again, getting down to that nitty-gritty. They will have a couple open sessions practice-wise this week, and then they shut down. They go dark for camp next week and preparation. So that's how close we are. We'll get a couple more looks for 20-minute windows or whatever it is, and we'll hear from Aranda, I guess, once more. And then the next time we hear from him after this Saturday will be to start his weekly press conferences. So that's almost upon us, and definitely – interested to hear what he has to say about the topics that we've already discussed after another week under their belts. And, not sure how much he'll divulge in terms of more detail, but if he's still talking injuries and O-line play, I'm going to be a little bit more worried again this Saturday. But then again, injuries are something everybody deals with in a total wild card, and the O-line thing, I mean, that should be expected because that's been a talking point the entire year. So.
It definitely is, but this is a big week for the offense in general. Offensive line that we've talked about, quarterback battle that we've talked about. I think the receivers probably need to take another step forward. I think that the secondary beat them this week as well. So it's being competitive, right? I feel like that was a motto for this team all offseason, being competitive, and in these adverse situations, coming out and showing your best the next time out. And how do you respond to losing a battle? I think that makes this week very key for the offense. How do they respond to what happened to them this weekend and what has happened to them early on in camp? Can they shift that? And can they bring kind of that mindset that I believe Dave Aranda and Jake Spavital want from them? Very curious about that. I think that's actually a very big storyline going into this weekend, because you really want to see a team that can, get up off the ground, right? And go out and win a battle after losing. So I'm curious about that for the offense, and I'm also curious to see where this quarterback battle goes and if the offense line can take a step forward. Outside of that, I feel like the defense has taken a step forward, and so I think that is a positive sign. But now can the two sides both kind of come together into forming a really good team? We'll see on that.
All right, so that's a little bit from practice and what has gone on so far. Again, a couple of media sessions this week, and then they will shut it down in terms of public access and media access for a few days and go into hibernation mode, basically, or preparation mode, I should say, for Tarleton State here in less than 2 weeks from now. So off the field, another big recruiting splash made, although recruiting has slowed down a little bit compared especially to the way that it was over the course of most of the summer, when seemingly every other day there was a new commit dropping. But this one a big one, and a little bit of a ways out, class of 2026. So not the upcoming class, the one that follows that, but that class of 2026 for the Baylor Bears now has its quarterback is Liberty Christian's Quinn Murphy, committed to the Bears this past week, had offers from Arkansas and Houston and UConn, and I'm probably missing some here as well, Miami and Michigan and Missouri and NC State and Oak State and SMU and UCF, and the list goes on and on and on. I could mention a few others, but you get the drift. And that's a nice little offer list there for Quinn Murphy, who becomes the Bears signal caller for 2026. And this was something that was talked about a little bit, and we've talked about, every class needs its quarterback. And so this is the guy for the 2026 class. We know Baylor's luck or lack thereof when it comes to quarterbacks at times, but Quinn Murphy, your thoughts on this splash? How big is it, and what does it mean, and where does the 2026 class go from here?
This is a massive get for Jake Spavital, and Rhett Holcomb as well was a big part of his recruitment, because Quinn kind of spanned two coaching staffs, right? Because Sean Bell offered him, and then when Jake Spavital got the job, this was his first offer. Quinn actually told me after he committed, it was one of those situations where Spavital moved in to Baylor 3 hours into his time in the office. One of the first things he did was re-offer Quinn Murphy. He made him a priority, and he was their guy, and they went out and they got him. And that's really huge, I think, for this staff as a whole, to go out, identify your top target, land your top target. I feel like Baylor did that also at the running back position with Rylan Morris and Davis Penn in this class. I'm curious if they're able to continue this momentum, and I feel like there are a few others that Baylor's in a great spot for, especially on the offensive side. So as far as Quinn goes, he spent 2 years at Austin Regents, smaller TAP school, was very successful. Last year, he threw for 3,000 yards, 52 touchdowns with just 8 interceptions, completed 70% of his passes, also had 5 rushing touchdowns. As a freshman, he threw for over 2,400 yards and 33 touchdowns with just 3 interceptions. So he has been really, really good the last 2 years. Now he's moving to Argyle Liberty Christian, which is where Jason Witten is the head coach. they are a dominant program, and he's about to put up even more numbers. He is moving up a level classification-wise, so there will be more talent, but his team is very, very talented, so I'm expecting him to just build off of what he's done at Regents. Really good quarterback prospect. I have him rated as a 4-star. Rivals does as well. 247 and on 3 are lower on him for some reason that doesn't make any sense to me. This is the kind of prospect who should be rated as a 4-star prospect at this timeline. Main reasons for that are his offer list is really good, but the bigger thing about that offer list is he actually went out and visited these schools. He went out and camped at these schools and competed at these schools. So these offers aren't just, hey, we turned on your film and we like what we saw. This is, we got to know you, we saw you play, we've seen you throw the football, and now we're going to offer you. That speaks volumes. And when you have the offer list that you mentioned, it's massive. So this is a huge get, I think, for Baylor. He's going to be a guy who's going to recruit for the 2026 class as well. He wants to be a leader in that regard. And he told me, I felt like the best quote that he kind of mentioned for me was talking about the 2025 class. He said, they set the standard and now we have to break it. There's no reason why we can't do that. That's huge. That's very telling.
Yeah, it's a nice quote, and 20-plus offers for him from all of the major conferences when you count Arkansas there from the SEC, obviously Baylor from the Big 12, Michigan there from the Big 10, and then Miami from the ACC, and I could hit others up from each of those, Missouri for the SEC or whatever, but just quickly looking it over, he got all the Power 4 conferences offering to some extent. So, yeah, I would not be surprised to see his rating rise. I think it's a little bit more difficult depending on the logo that you pledge to. I think if he had pledged to, I don't know, Michigan. Oklahoma or Michigan, then they're probably looking at it a little bit differently. And that's just the way that it's always been, and the way that it always will be. There will always be some sort of a bias, I feel like, for bigger schools versus not 20 or so blue bloods. And so it might take a little while longer to see a boost in the rating, but go out and play well this fall and force them into giving you that 4-star across the board. But regardless of what some film watchers and graders and evaluations are saying about Quinn Murphy, obviously the staff's over the moon about the pledge and what that means for the 2026 class, and that's really all that matters. So that's a big one, and he is the third member of the 2026 recruiting class, joining the running back tandem of Ryland Morris from Honey Grove and South Lake Carroll's Davis Penn. So you got your backfield. Definitely need some O-linemen. Definitely need some, pieces elsewhere. But that's a pretty nice start for the 2026 class, which is on deck now for the attention here in the next few months. Really start to chip away at that recruiting class. So nice start for the Bears in that regard. Anything else recruiting-wise worth mentioning right now?
Well, I did want to mention, I think it's important just to note Baylor's 2026 class is currently ranked number 12 in the country. It's early, and I think some of the rankings, like I mentioned for Quinn Murphy, a little bit off. I think this should be basically a top 10 class at this time. And so it's really impressive, once again, what they've been able to do. The staff's just continuing to hammer away, and that's what they've done for the past months now. And so the 2026 class, number 12 currently in the 247 rankings. We'll see how they build on that. The 2025 class currently sits at number 30 as well, with 19 commits there. So that's kind of a quick update. The only other thing that I'll mention recruiting-wise right now is that Kilgore, cornerback Jaden Sanders, the 4-star prospect, he chose Michigan over Baylor and Oklahoma State. Tough loss. Baylor had been recruiting him for a while. He's a really good prospect. Really, really good player. I think he's going to do some great things at Michigan. He was definitely a guy that Baylor wanted. Didn't happen. That's going to happen occasionally. But I will say Baylor does have some other guys that they're interested in at the defensive back position, such as SMU commit Zay Gentry and Ridge Point cornerback Bryson Weber, who's committed to Nebraska. Those are two guys that I would definitely keep an eye on as potential, not just replacements for Jaden Sanders, but guys they've really wanted for a long time and are going to continue to pursue. So that's kind of how they're making up for that potential miss there. Outside of that, it's kind of business as usual. I think the staff right now is probably at a point where let's go into the season. Let's try to win football games. And then at the end of the year, when you have an opportunity to bring guys who maybe didn't take an official visit on an official visit, you can do that, but you also have wins to show. Because right now they've been able to recruit with the 3-9 record. Imagine what they'd be able to do if they win, 6-7 games, make a bowl game, have bowl prep time. It'd be huge, and guys would be able to come watch practice and be around the program during that time period. It's just massive and something that you can't really replace, and that's why making a bowl game is so important in my eyes for this year.
Yeah, and on the flip side, go 3-9 again and watch that all start to fall apart potentially. So, yeah, winning on the field is always important, but more important this year than, I don't know, it's felt like in a couple of years, although it's been important every year. It's just like you feel there's no, I guess, long leash still sitting out there where you won the Big 12 title and you've got this grace period where you can kind of fall back or not be as good for a little bit. It's like, no, that's been a couple years now of that. You have to prove something on the field in order to keep this whole house of cards from falling apart. So, yeah, if you could win some games, that would go a really long way and create some momentum that carries over, just not from pledges, but into actual signings and then their play on the field and so on and so forth. So that would be lovely to see. But, yeah, we'll find out again starting here in a couple of weeks. And just love saying that over and over because it means like we actually are that close. And we're no longer like projecting 5 months out like we are or 10 months out. It's like, no, we actually get to see them play Tarleton State in 2 weeks and for better or worse have, an opportunity to really know what this team looks like. And same goes for the recruits. And that's going to be huge in a lot of different ways. All right, so there's some team stuff and some recruiting stuff. Meanwhile, the preseason AP Top 25 poll was released and wasn't expecting to see Baylor in there, and we didn't see Baylor in there, but we did see Georgia at the top, along with Ohio State and Oregon, all three of those teams receiving first-place votes. Georgia with 46, Ohio State with 15, and Oregon with a single first-place vote. Texas now in the SEC at 4, and Alabama at number 5. So there's your top 5 from the Associated Press. But of note from the Big 12, you see your first school from the conference there at number 12 with Utah leading the way. And then you've got Oklahoma State at number 17, Kansas State at number 18, Arizona at 21, and Kansas at 22. So 5 Big 12 teams. I think when I looked at it yesterday, it was like 9 SEC teams, like 6 Big 10, and then 5 Big 12, and what does that leave? Like 5 from the ACC, I think was the breakdown of whatever the final totals were. There was no independent team in here, and I guess, Notre Dame, but I counted them towards the ACC in my little tally there. So really pretty even. Like the SEC has like double the Big 12, but I think you'd expect that. So that wasn't really a surprise to me. But anything from those 5 jump out to you? 12 starting with Utah through, 17, 18 with Oak State, Kansas State, and then 21 and 22 with Arizona and Kansas. Anything notable there from the preseason top 25?
I think the main 2 things that stood out were the fact that the Big 12 has 5 teams ranked in the top 25. That's a really good number. I think that you could probably talk yourself into one of Iowa State or West Virginia being in there. They received votes, but I think 5 is a good number in my eyes to start the season. There's a lot of depth in this conference, a lot of parity, and honestly a lot of questions about many of the teams in the conference. So this feels like a good group to start with. I like that Utah's up at number 12. I think that's a very fair ranking for them. I think it's a good spot for them to start as well. There's a lot of ability to move up in the rankings from there. Nice to see Kansas. I mean, that's just one of those crazy storylines when you talk about, you remember Kansas football 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and now they're ranked and coming off of a great season last year. Lance Leipold has that program rolling really well. My other takeaway really from this is that Baylor plays 3 of these 5 ranked teams. which is interesting. You avoid two of them in Kansas State and Arizona. They play Utah on the road, but they get Oklahoma State and Kansas at home. So that's also kind of an interesting wrinkle. Do want to mention, like I said, Iowa State, West Virginia received votes, and then Colorado received one vote. I don't know who voted for them, maybe Dion, but that was rather interesting.
Yeah, not in the AP top 25. He would in the coaches poll potentially. I don't know if he has a vote or not, but yeah, somebody's drinking the Kool-Aid in Boulder, and who knows, man? I mean, there's enough uncertainty that they could jump up and be a top 25 team at some point. I mean, they've got the quarterback, they've got the dual threat star in Travis Hunter, and they've got a lot of transfers they brought in. I mean, I know it's easy to crack on them, but I don't think anybody really knows what Colorado's going to be one way or the other. So, yeah, I could see them being in the top 25, and I could see them being the team they were in the second half last year where, how's Dion going to get out of this situation by the end of this thing?
Right.
Because it's not going the way you think. And Shador's leaving and Travis Hunter's leaving, and they're going to the NFL. That's going to be very interesting how this season goes for Colorado and what it looks like at the end of it.
So many unknowns, and I can guarantee you the vote was not from CBS. If they had a vote in this, they definitely did not vote for this one.
The anti-Colorado?
Yeah, because Dion made the comment about CBS, right? How he's not answering questions from CBS people.
Oh, I didn't see the CBS line. I saw him another session with reporters. Him and Sean Keeler is the one that I saw. I was on vacation, so I paid attention here and there. I didn't see the CBS comment in particular. I don't know. I'm never fawned over Dion. When he was with the Dallas Cowboys, and I wasn't a Cowboys fan growing up, nor am I still. I just automatically. I mean, just like the way I disliked Michael Irvin and I disliked Emmett. I didn't root for those guys, but I just remember people gushing over Dion. And look, he was like King Griffey Jr. and Michael Jordan. Like, he was one of the biggest stars of my era growing up. But the fawning that continues even now because of what he did back then by some media members, it makes me sick to my stomach because I just don't play like that. So I don't dive into all things Dion. I catch things here and there. But the hero worship that you see from some circles, I'll never understand that. And he's the Antichrist that you see from some circles. I don't get that either. So, yeah, man, I definitely think he is not all that he's cracked up to be. I also don't think he's like the death of college football.
No.
But, man, there's so much that comes about. It's hard to get every little thing that comes out about Dion. He's covered so intensely. So, yeah, I missed the CBS comment.
Yeah, they're a very fascinating team this year, though. I will say they're probably the team that I'm the most uneasy about because I feel like they could be really good, and I also feel like they could be really bad. And so it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, where do they fit into the Big 12? Are they going to play defense this year? Are these transfers, this mountain of transfers that they brought in, is that going to work? Didn't work last year. Maybe it works this year. I have a lot of questions about it, but I think they're one of the biggest wild cards in the Big 12 this season. So very curious about that. But yeah, outside of that, I think good for the Big 12. I mean, five teams in the top 25. I think that's a nice start to the year, and I think they could end up with more than that by the time the season's over.
Certainly. So not a bad starting point, but the highest ranked at number 12 is something to also monitor. I mean, whoever wins the conference, unless they have multiple losses, you feel good about them getting into the playoff without really much question about that.
Well, they get an auto bid now and a top 4 bid. So
yeah, but I mean, that's not guaranteed to be the Big 12. So you still got to go out and win the games. It's not the auto bids are the 4 highest ranked. It's not necessarily going to be Big 12 champion. So you still got to go out there and prove it. And the other teams will have to do that to make it more complicated. But, yeah, I mean, the general thought is you're going to have an automatic bid. I push back on that a little bit because if you're like a 5-loss Big 12 team, you're going to get in. Mm-hmm. But I'm more or less thinking of, the buys in the first round and, being considered one of the top teams. I don't know that the Big 12 champ will always get that measure of love just simply by being the champion. I think you're going to have to be the champion and be pretty good to get any ounce of respect. And that's just sort of the way that college football is now, where 2 leagues kind of run everything and get all the benefit of the doubt and get all the love and get the majority of the spots probably in the playoffs. So, yeah, the Big 12, the champion you feel good about, but the real question is, where's the second team? And is there even a shot at all for ever having a third team in these things? But, 5 teams at least starting off with good spots in the top 25 and, see what this league looks like. It should be pretty crazy. I think that's what we're all expecting is kind of everybody beating up on each other. That can be a good thing for watching on Saturdays. It can be a detrimental thing for the polls and your playoff spots as well. So that is something that could be a gift and a curse for the Big 12. We will find out again starting next Saturday. So there you go with the top 25 poll. And is there anything else, Grayson, before we get into some questions here?
No, I think that's pretty much it so far. We've covered most of everything from this week.
All right, so let's go ahead and then dive into questions. BU Grad 21, what's up with Gary Patterson? Last week we were moving on, and this week he's at practice. We mentioned this a little bit ago, but
it's just weird.
Yeah, it is
just
weird.
A weird situation. I mean, when it was announced that he was coming to Baylor, it was a weird situation. When he left Baylor, it was weird. When Dave Aranda answered your question at Big 12 Media Days, it was weird. It's just all kind of been one of those things where I don't know that we have a specific answer to it, but the one that we got right now is that he's just a friend of the program. So that's what it is, I think.
Yeah, still not as weird as I would imagine being out at TCU practices and seeing all the old faces out there. And I don't miss mean Kendall, but just in general, that is a weird thing to see Gary Patterson in green and gold like we did for the first time during the spring. And then to see that he's on his way out and then he's back in. And, yeah, I don't know. Like we discussed earlier, he's just helping here and there, I suppose, and, it's all unofficial, and whatever Dave Aranda wants to take in and digest and use, then, hey, I'm not going to turn him away if I'm Dave Aranda, unless it's not a problematic situation. I think he was more or less of just like he didn't really know his role or his place or his value, and I don't know, if he gets some value and just coming out every once in a while and giving a pointer here and there that can help you win football games, then I don't see anything wrong with that. But it is still very strange, and I totally understand if you're a Baylor fan, you still have some level of mistrust even at this point because it's weird. So, yeah, I wish you could answer exactly BU Grad 21, but just a friend of the program is, I think, the best way to put it at this point. Burger 86, you can't be a tough defensive team without hard physical practices, so tell me how physical have these practices been?
I mean, from what I can tell, they've been a notch up from what they were. I think that really it's more the mindset than anything else. I think physically, I do believe they had tough practices in the past, but I think mentally they were weak. And I think last year they mentally were very weak. Physically, at times they were weak too. But I think Aranda's mentioned it enough to where I kind of sit back and go, okay, when this team got just knocked down, they just could never get up. And that was kind of their problem, I think, last year.
Wilted, just completely wilted at times.
And a lot of that is physical, or a lot of that is mental, not just, physical practices. I think a lot of it was just the mental part of football. I think the physicality in practices is there. I think it is at a high enough level for them to be successful. And we've seen it. That's the thing. We saw it in 2021, but the thing about the 2021 team is they were elite mentally as well. And so the question is, can this team get there? But physically in practices, yeah, they're moving around. They're playing physical. They're having fights. They're having, dust-ups, things like that.
Doc Crowell, would you take the early reports out of camp that defense dominated the first scrimmage more as an indictment of the offense having a ways to go, or that the defense is just looking that stout?
I think initially, after one scrimmage, I think you have to take it more as an indictment of the offense. Currently, I don't think that means that the defense hasn't improved, because I do believe they have. But I do think the offense, particularly the offensive line, still has a ways to go in fall camp. And the good news is you got 2 weeks during fall camp, which is a time where you can absolutely get better.
Bad news is you've got 2 weeks until the games start, and how much better can you actually get from where you are? That is the million-dollar question. At some point, however this looks, however they get there, the offensive line's got to improve. I mean, this is like we're going on like 4 years in a row of like bad O-line play. I mean, it's not quite 4. I guess it would technically be 3. But still, man, it seems like forever ago that they had just like not even good, but just like satisfactory.
2022, they had a good offensive line. Okay, I would say.
I think that just last year was just so bad. Mm-hmm. But even 2022, it was just fine. Like it was. I'm probably not giving enough credit 2 years removed from it because it's been so long ago now at this point, but it just seems like an ongoing storyline that we've been talking about for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's just at some point, like, man, you can't go 3 years in a row. It's like the O-line's still a problem. And I understand coaching changes and all of that, O-line, NIL probably coming into play in some cases, but yeah, it's just such a drag because it just brings everything down with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would call 2022 disappointing because of what they returned from 2021, right?
For sure.
They were still good, but they weren't top 10 like
nearly
they were
as good
in
as they were
2021.
expected to be.
Right,
yeah.
and then last year, obviously, you go from still probably a top 40 offensive line to being one of the worst offensive lines in the country. So that's a huge shift, and you're exactly right. There is only 2 weeks, but the other part about it is they're rotating a lot of guys in. So the question is that rotation also being a function in why they're struggling, or is it simply they can't find the 5 guys that they need to really go out there and be a cohesive unit? I think that's something we're probably going to learn more about this week.
When you're doing the official Baylor podcast, is there anything you have to bite your tongue on, being so used to discussing things like recruiting freely? I guess obviously referring to the new SicEm365 and Baylor Athletics partnership, you and Colt doing a daily podcast. And so, anything you have to bite your tongue on?
Yeah, we can't talk recruiting nearly as freely because it's still linked with Baylor. So you can only talk about guys who are signed. You can talk about vague topics, but if you want to know about prospects who have not signed, this is the place for it. And of course the premium side of things. But yeah, that's the main one. Outside of that, no, we're giving our opinions unbiased, talking about the games as the season comes and talking about, fall camp and where things are at right now without filter.
If you could watch a full practice and choose what group to spend the day with, which would each of you pick?
The offensive line. I'm so intrigued by that position. They brought in all these new guys, and I'm just trying to, I would just love to just sit there and watch the entire practice because it's been very physical for that group from what we've gotten to see, and I've loved some of the drills that they've been doing with Mason Miller. But I would be really intrigued to just be there the whole time and watch these guys go at it.
Yeah, I think maybe wide receiver, just to kind of see just in depth of like sort of the attitude and or lack thereof of this group. I mean, I don't love that I'm not hearing still that anybody's like really separating themselves. And granted, how are you going to do that in these settings, when the games roll around though? But like, man, if they're still rolling out there and they're timid and they're not like going up and getting ferocious with it, like that is a red bleeping flag, because you talk about like a couple of years of talking about the same sort of thing. I feel like we've been talking about the wide receivers, with all due respect, for a couple of seasons now.
Yeah.
And they got to show some bark this year and some bites along with that bark, because bark means nothing if you can't, back it up.
Right.
So I would like to just see just kind of see what the leadership looks like, and just kind of what the attitude and the all of that is, because it's an intriguing group, but it's just like, all right, when are you guys going to bust loose, and why is that not happening? If it's not happening, or if it is, who's kind of leading the charge? So I'm just intrigued by them because I feel like they've got to be really good this year.
Yeah, they do.
To help this team just get over the hump.
And they finally have the talent. The problem, 2022 and last year, they did not have the talent.
Right.
And or guys weren't ready to, assume that role, and now they are. They should be, at least. And you brought in a guy like Ashton Hawkins, who I do think is going to provide a lot of what you're talking about. But yeah, that's an intriguing group, and one that you're exactly right. They have to be good for this team to be successful.
Doc, with a follow-up, if either of you could suit up and take a few reps in practice, what group would you want to join? Quarterbacks, because they don't get touched by anybody.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's a fair point. Wide receiver, as long as it's not full contact. If it is full contact, then kicker.
Yeah, kicker would be another one as well. Yeah, I'm not built to take any hits, especially from any of these dudes. Maybe when I was younger, it felt like you're bulletproof, but not these days. So, yeah, I would stay out of the action as much as possible. So quarterback and special teams would fit that bill. Zihuatanejo Bear, I love the specificity of Grayson's game-by-game season predictions. Do you go back and check the actual results versus your predictions to see if any of them came very close to coming true?
I've had a few over the years that the exact score has bared out. But as far as gameplay goes, that is no. Like, I mean, I'll hit on some things like the quarterback playing really well or time of possession, like generic stuff, but getting exact stats right, that's really, really difficult. I will say, as far as overall predictions and my record predictions, it's been pretty good some years and then pretty bad other years. It's kind of one of those things. It's been shifting, and Baylor specifically, we've seen it shift so much with their wins and losses over the years that it's been kind of tough to predict them. I was on a roll for a while there when Rule was the coach, and then the Sugar Bowl year. But the last 2 years, I've been significantly off.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to do. It's not people. You get paid to do. It's like, yeah, but you don't take into account that there's just so many wild cards with predicting things, and the more specific you get, the more difficult it can get. Not to try to say like there's no accountability or anything like that with making predictions, but yeah, it's an inexact science. Like the people that are the best at it get paid to do it in Vegas for millions of dollars.
And the portal makes it even more difficult. Right. And last year's team specifically, there's no way that any of us could have predicted that the offensive line would have been to that level. After seeing what Mateos did with the 2020 offensive line to 2021, it was rather shocking. So again, that stuff fluctuates, but at times, pretty accurate with certain records.
Scotty B, the Baylor King, who do you think will be the best quarterback that Baylor will face this year? And just taking a look at the schedule, that will include Cam Rising and Shedeur Sanders, which is my answer.
Shedeur.
Yeah, Rocco Becht. We'll see on BYU, Jake Retzliff or Gary Bohannon, but they're not either one the best. Alan Bowman, Baron Morton, Josh Hoover, Garrett Green, which would be my him and Jalen Daniels. Daniels and Donovan Smith. Those are the quarterbacks basically you're looking at. I don't know Air Forces off the top of my head, nor would that be the best quarterback you're going to face. And can't think of Tarleton's off the top of my head either. But again, would not be the best one that you face when you've got this Big 12 schedule and some of the names that I mentioned. So, yeah, the first one that pops to me is I'd say Shedeur, and then it would be like Jalen Daniels or Garrett Green as the 2 option. I don't have a gun to my head to have to choose there, so you get where I'm coming from. But, yeah, I would say Shedeur, number 1.
I'd have Cam Rising in that top 4. Those are the 4 best
if we were going to keep going, he'd be there,
Those are the 4 top ones. Yeah, you mentioned Air Force. They have a new quarterback this year, so he will definitely not be in their top group. It's interesting because at the end of the years when Baylor plays Kansas, I don't know if they're going to have Jalen Daniels for that game. Yeah. He hasn't really been available at the end of seasons. If he is, then I think I'd probably go with him. But because I don't have a lot of faith that he will be, I think I'm going to go with Garrett Green there for West Virginia, especially because they're going to have to play him in Morgantown, which he's very, very good away and on the and at home. But at home, he's been really, really good since last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very fair pick. I had him, they're at 2A or 2B, however you want to look at that. I think Shedeur definitely suffered from the O-line play last year, but very talented young man. And, the attitude that comes with that, it's a detrimental thing when they're not playing very well, but when they are, like, that's what you want your quarterback to be like, right? It's like kind of cocky, but very confident in what he does and can do. And when you saw Shedeur have that ability last year, like you can hate on the personality or the father or whatever, but like you can't deny he's not a good football player, and he's going to be in the NFL sooner rather than later. So yeah, I think that'll be a very interesting early challenge. Week 4?
Yeah,
they head to Boulder, so
and they have weapons. They brought in a lot of really good receivers. You mentioned Travis Hunter, but also LeJante Wester, which was a head-to-head battle with Baylor that they won. Will Shepard from Vanderbilt as well. I mean, they are loaded at wide receiver. That's going to be really fun to watch. He's going to put up huge numbers. The question for them is, can they run the ball at all, and can their defense be any good? Those are really the 2 things that I have big questions about.
Yeah, and that's the 2 big areas of just, the overwhelming negatives from Colorado's season last year were those 2 areas, and those remain so on paper until we see otherwise. But, I think that game in Boulder will be awfully interesting, just where Baylor is record-wise rolling into that game, and then what they kind of are in terms of just perception and kind of feel in the air by that game. I feel like we're going to kind of know what sort of a fork in the road Boulder has in store. Grant Walker will close it out here. When will the full men's basketball non-conference schedule be released, and when will we get the conference game schedule? Well, the Big 12 announced some games, but the announcement that came like a month ago, a little over a month ago, like 6 weeks ago. It said they'd release the full schedule at a later date, but it didn't clarify what that was. So, I don't know. But the Big 12 schedule was put out there, and as far as the rest of the details and all of that, I have no idea.
Right. We know who Baylor plays. We just don't know when and what the order is. And as far as the non-conference, we know some of the things, such as the tournament games, but that's about it. That's all we really have at this time. And I'm not sure when it's going to be released, but I would think it would be pretty soon. I don't know when they did it last year.
BYU apparently released their non-con yesterday, I guess, based on just a quick little look at a link here. So I don't know. That doesn't mean that a full schedule release from the conference is coming because BYU released their non-con. But, I mean, the more you start to fill in blanks, there's only so much left to fill in. So I feel like that's probably coming pretty soon. And, you won't have to wait too much longer for that, but I don't have any idea on an official announcement. So sorry that I can't give you more there, Grant Walker. All right, so those are the questions in the mailbag this week. I'd imagine that thing's going to look a lot different starting next week with the actual countdown to Tarleton State and what we're going to see and all those different types of things. So we're almost there, but Grayson, in terms of this week, anything you want to add before we head on out of here?
Not too much. Just I know coming up in the next few weeks, we're going to have to give our season predictions. So that'll be something to look forward to on this show. As far as SicEm365, tons of premium content, whether it's recruiting, fall camp. We have so much stuff on fall camp right now, whether it's, views from the Brazos, from Jack, Levi Caraway with all his articles with quotes and really good quotes about, the staff and conversations that the staff has had during press conferences and really good stories there. Colt's been writing a lot as well, just kind of on the status of the program and inside information. I'll have insider notes tonight on Baylor's practice from today, so stay tuned for that, as well as some Saturday scrimmage notes. So again, it's never been a better time to join SicEm365 Premium. Don't forget, we also have a bundle now with Baylor Plus for $17.99, so you can get both for the price of one, essentially.
Yeah, so take advantage of that deal if you only have one and not the other, or if you don't have either, then now is the time to go scrounge together less than $20 and get yourself a new experience or a more expanded experience following Baylor athletics and Baylor football this season. Tons to digest and devour if you're a Baylor fan over on SicEm365.com and Baylor Plus as well. So, definitely take advantage of that deal. Thanks to Garrett Ross behind the scenes and Jack McKenzie as well. And for Grayson Grudenhafer, that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back to preview Tarleton State next week and to start to get into the actual season itself, which is all very exciting, although a little bit nerve-wracking because don't quite know what to expect. But, man, I'd rather see it than not see it, that's for sure. So for better or worse, and hopefully much better, the season starts next week, and let's ride. Let's have some fun with this thing for the next few months. But until then, hope you have a great week. For everybody I mentioned, I'm Craig Smoke, and we will talk to you next week, next Tuesday, live on the Baylor Athletics on SicEm365 YouTube page, each Tuesday at 11:15. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, or tune into 365 Sports, 365 Sports YT, the page there. You can hit like and subscribe. We'd appreciate that as well. But content. Plenty to look for if you're a Baylor fan. We've got you covered. And until next time, this has been the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.